Okay, so are you ready to dive deep into some serious philosophy?
Always ready.
Because today we're tackling Kant's critique of judgment. And you sent over a ton of sources like excerpts from the text, translators' notes, even scholarly articles, so it's clear you're not messing around. But don't worry, that's what we do here, to help you extract those golden nuggets of Kantian wisdom.
It's always really exciting to see someone ready to really grapple with Kant, and especially this critique.
Right. It's a big one. And so before we get lost in all the details, can you give us the big picture? I know Kant wrote three critiques, so where does this one fit in?
Yeah, so it's really helpful to see the three critiques,
Hmm.
pure reason, practical reason, and judgment as parts of one big project. You see, in the critique of pure reason, Kant was trying to figure out the boundaries of what we can know just by thinking,
Mhm.
theoretically.
Okay.
Then, in the critique of practical reason, he shifted gears to explore moral principles and the idea of freedom.
Okay, so we've got theoretical knowledge versus moral action. But where does the critique of judgment come in?
That's where things get really, really fascinating. The critique of judgment is like a bridge between the other two. It's about how we make judgments about beauty and purpose, even when we don't have strict rules to go by. Kant calls this reflective judgment.
So it's not just about applying pre-existing knowledge, it's about figuring things out as we encounter something new.
Exactly. Imagine this, you see a tree, you know, your brain instantly recognizes it as a tree because you have a concept of tree,
Mhm.
right? Roots, trunk, branches, leaves.
Yeah.
That's determinative judgment for Kant, just plugging something into a category.
Okay, that makes sense. So reflective judgment would be encountering something brand new.
Exactly. Imagine you're walking through a forest and you come across a plant you've never seen before. You can't just put it into a category.
Right.
Your mind has to work in reverse, trying to find a principle to understand it,
Yeah.
right? And that's what the critique of judgment is all about, especially when you talk about beauty and purpose in nature.
And you mentioned purpose earlier, and I noticed that phrase, purposiveness without a purpose, popping up in these sources. What is that all about?
Yeah, it's one of Kant's most intriguing ideas. He's saying that we often look at nature and see purpose, even if we can't prove there was a purpose. Like a flower, right? Its shape might seem perfect for attracting pollinators, but we can't know for sure if that's why it evolved that way.
So I can appreciate the design of a flower without assuming that someone created it to be beautiful.
Exactly. And that leads us to one of the core topics of this critique, judgments of taste, diving into the beautiful.
Okay, count me in. I am ready to dive into some beautiful things. One of these quotes I'm looking at talks about disinterested and contemplative pleasure when we experience beauty. Can you unpack that a bit?
Yeah, so what's really fascinating here is that Kant is super precise with his language. He breaks down liking into three categories. First, liking for the agreeable, which is just pure sensory pleasure, like enjoying the taste of chocolate.
Oh, okay, so that's just basic enjoyment, just your senses.
Then there's liking for the good, which is connected to moral concepts and purposes, like admiring someone's honesty or bravery. But liking for the beautiful, that's something else entirely.
So what makes that so special?
Kant is saying that when you experience true beauty, you're not focused on what the object can do for you or how it relates to your personal desires. It's not about wanting to eat the beautiful apple or own the beautiful painting. You're enjoying it for its own sake. And this is where it gets really interesting. He says these judgments of taste, even though they are based on your personal feeling, claim to be universally valid.
Wait, so subjective and universal at the same time. How does that work?
He's saying that when you experience something as beautiful, you feel like everyone should feel the same way. You're not just saying, I like this. You're saying, this is beautiful, and anyone with good taste would agree. Of course, people have different preferences, so we don't always agree in practice. But that underlying sense of universality is what makes judgments of beauty different from just personal preference.
So even though, I know not everyone loves classical music the way I do, I still feel like they should be able to experience the beauty I hear in it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Kant links this to what he calls the free play of our cognitive powers.
Okay.
It's this harmonious dance between our imagination and understanding that happens when we experience something beautiful.
Okay, now you've got to break that down for me. Free play. What does that mean?
Imagine this. You're looking at a sunflower.
Right.
Its shape, its color, even its scent, right?
Yeah.
It stimulates your senses, right? Your imagination is trying to pull it all together while your understanding is trying to grasp its form. When those two are working together smoothly, that's the free play.
So it's not just passively taking it all in, it's actively engaging with it.
Absolutely. And it's this free play that makes beauty feel both personal and potentially universal. This leads to another distinction Kant makes: free beauty versus accessory beauty.
Oh, okay. I'm intrigued. Give me an example.
So a wildflower embodies free beauty. Its beauty is in its pure form, independent of any purpose. But a well-designed building, that's accessory beauty. We judge it in relation to its purpose, its concept.
So with the building, you can't separate the beauty from its function.
Right. But with a wildflower, the beauty's just there regardless of what it's for.
Mhm.
And speaking of things that can influence our judgments, Kant also mentions the role of charm.
Ah, yes, charm. So can something be beautiful but not charming, or charming but not beautiful?
That's exactly the kind of nuance Kant's getting at. He's warning us not to confuse charm with beauty. Charm can add to our enjoyment of something, but Kant argues that true beauty stands on its own, like a puppy. A
Mm.
puppy might be incredibly charming,
Right.
but that's different from the beauty of a mountain range.
So charm can distract us from true beauty.
Yeah, if we get too caught up in the charm, we might miss the deeper aesthetic experience.
Wow, this is already making me rethink how I experience the world.
And we're just getting started.
Right. I can see why Kant needed like a whole book to explore this. We've only covered judgments of taste, and my mind is buzzing. But there's so much more to unpack, like this whole idea of the sublime, those experiences that evoke awe and wonder.
The sublime is definitely where things get even more intense.
I can't wait to dive into that. But I think, before we do, maybe we should pause here and let our listener absorb all of this.
Yeah, this is the kind of material that deserves to be savored.
Okay, so we're back and like ready to tackle the next peak in our Kantian mountain range, the sublime.
That's right.
Last time we were exploring judgments of taste and that free play of our minds and how that allows us to experience beauty.
Yeah, and now we're moving from like beauty to something even more powerful, something that can evoke awe, wonder, even like a touch of terror.
Right, the sublime. This word's popping up everywhere in these sources, and it definitely seems to like hit us differently than beauty does. Beauty is more about harmony and pleasure, right?
Yes, beauty has that sense of balance and delight. But the sublime, for Kant, goes beyond just pleasure. It's about encountering something so vast, so powerful, that it overwhelms our senses and makes us feel, well, kind of insignificant.
Yeah, okay. I'm getting chills just thinking about it. Like standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon or looking up at a sky full of stars. Those experiences definitely evoke something bigger than just, oh, that's pretty.
Exactly. Kant says that with the sublime, we're not just experiencing a pleasant feeling, we're confronting our own limitations. The sheer magnitude or power of the thing, whether it's a raging storm or a towering mountain,
Yeah.
it makes us realize how small we are.
It's almost like a humbling experience.
Exactly. And it can even be a bit frightening, but that doesn't mean it's a negative experience. Kant argues that this very inability to grasp the vastness or power of the sublime actually leads to a feeling of elevation.
So even though we feel small, we also feel uplifted. How does that work?
Because it forces us to think beyond our normal everyday experience. It pushes us to contemplate the infinite, something that goes beyond what we can fully comprehend.
I see, it's like our minds are expanding to try and take it all in. And I'm seeing here that Kant distinguishes between two types of sublime, the mathematically sublime and the dynamically sublime. What's the difference?
So the mathematically sublime is all about vastness of size. Think about trying to wrap your mind around the immensity of space or the endless stretch of the ocean. Our imaginations just can't fully contain it.
So it's almost frustrating in a way, like trying to fit the whole universe into your head.
Yes, there's definitely a sense of being overwhelmed. But like we said before, it's not simply a negative feeling. It's that very inability to grasp the vastness that leads to a feeling of awe and elevation. We come face to face with something that transcends our comprehension.
We're pushed to the very limits of our understanding. Okay, so that's the mathematically sublime. What about the dynamically sublime?
The dynamically sublime is all about power and might, even danger. Imagine a violent thunderstorm or a volcanic eruption, anything that makes you feel the raw force of nature.
So instead of vastness, it's about intensity.
Yes, it's about feeling the potential power of something that could overwhelm us, even crush us, but ultimately doesn't.
So there's a mix of fear and respect.
Exactly. We feel our own vulnerability in the face of this immense power. But here's where it gets really interesting. Kant connects this experience of the dynamically sublime to our moral nature.
Now that's something I wouldn't have expected. How does the sublime relate to morality?
Think about it this way. When you're confronted with overwhelming power, you have a choice. You can either cower in fear or you can tap into a different kind of strength, like moral strength. You can choose to stand firm, to not be controlled by fear.
So it's like facing our fears can make us morally stronger.
That's the idea. The sublime, by reminding us of both our vulnerability and our capacity for courage, can actually awaken our sense of moral duty. It reminds us that we have the potential to act according to principles that go beyond mere self-preservation.
That is like a profound connection. So it's not just about feeling awe in the face of nature's power. It's about how that experience can inspire us to be better people. And I'm looking at my notes here. You mentioned that Kant gives some really unexpected examples of the sublime.
Oh yeah, he goes beyond just mountains and storms. For
Hmm.
instance, he brings up the commandment against graven images like in the Jewish law as an example of the sublime.
Now that's an interesting one. What does that have to do with the sublime?
Kant sees it as a prohibition against trying to reduce the divine to something we can visually represent. It's about acknowledging the limits of our ability to grasp the infinite.
I see. We can't capture the true essence of God in like a physical image. And that very inability to capture it is what makes it sublime.
Exactly. He also mentions the feeling of a wasteland, which I thought was really interesting.
A wasteland. How can that be sublime? It sounds kind of bleak.
Well, Kant sees a certain kind of beauty in desolation. The vast emptiness, the absence of human interference, can evoke a sense of awe. It can even spark this longing to escape the complexities of the world.
So it's about finding sublimity in unexpected places. Like, we might not think of a wasteland as beautiful in the traditional sense, but it can still evoke these feelings of awe and wonder.
Yes, it's about looking beyond the surface, beyond our preconceived notions of beauty and power. The sublime can be found in the vast and the mighty, but also in the stark and the seemingly barren.
All right, Kant is officially blowing my mind. But I think it's time to move on to our last major topic, teleology and the limits of reason.
Yes, this is where we start to grapple with the big questions about purpose and nature.
Right. And I'm noticing a lot of discussion in these sources about how we tend to see purpose in nature, even when we can't scientifically prove it's there.
That's the heart of teleology. It's this deep-seated human tendency to look at things in terms of their purpose, their function, their end goal. We're always asking, what's it for?
Like, why does a bird build a nest? We just assume it's for a reason, to protect its eggs, to raise its young.
Exactly. We instinctively see purpose in nature. And Kant points out that there are two main ways we explain things: mechanistic explanations and teleological explanations.
Okay, so break that down for me. What's the difference?
A mechanistic explanation focuses on cause and effect. Like if I drop a ball, it falls to the ground because of gravity.
Okay.
There's a clear chain of physical causes leading to a specific effect.
So it's about the how things happen in the physical world.
Right. But a teleological explanation looks at the why, the purpose of something. Like, why does a bird have wings? To fly, of course. We understand the wings in terms of their purpose.
So mechanistic is about the physical processes, and teleological is about the purpose behind those processes.
Precisely. And Kant is particularly interested in how we apply these ways of thinking to nature. He sees living organisms as prime examples of things that seem to have a purpose built into them.
Because all the different parts of an organism work together to keep it alive.
Exactly. The intricate design of a plant or an animal naturally leads us to wonder if there's some kind of designer, an intelligent force behind it all.
It makes sense that we would look at something as complex as a human body and wonder how it came to be that way. But Kant is also careful to say that we can't actually prove that there's a designer.
That's a key point. Kant distinguishes between what he calls regulative principles and constitutive principles.
Okay, now we're getting into some technical terms. Can you clarify those?
Think of it like this. Constitutive principles are the fundamental building blocks of knowledge. They tell us how things are. But regulative principles are more like guidelines or tools. They help us make sense of things, but they don't necessarily tell us the ultimate truth.
So constitutive is about what is, and regulative is about how we understand what is.
Exactly. And Kant says that teleology, the idea of purpose in nature, is a regulative principle.
So it's a useful way for us to think about nature, but we can't use it to prove whether or not there's a designer.
Right. We can't say for sure whether those organisms were intentionally designed or whether they evolved through some other process.
So we're left with this tension between two ways of understanding the world: mechanism and teleology.
Yes. And Kant doesn't try to resolve that tension completely. He sees it as a reflection of the limits of our reason. He argues that these two ways of thinking aren't necessarily contradictory, but rather reflect different ways of approaching nature.
So it's not about picking a winner, but about recognizing that both perspectives have value.
Exactly. And by understanding the limitations of each, we can use them both effectively to deepen our understanding of the world. We might not be able to definitively answer the ultimate questions about the universe, but we can still use these principles to make sense of what we observe.
Okay, so we've explored beauty, the sublime, and now this fascinating concept of teleology. And I have to say, my mind is officially stretched to its limits.
And the best part is, we're not done yet.
That's right. We still have to tackle the grand finale, the implications of all this for our understanding of ourselves and the world.
And that's where things get truly mind-blowing.
I can't wait. But for now, dear listener, take a moment to let all of this sink in. Go contemplate a vast landscape, maybe even that wasteland Kant was talking about, and get ready to explore the deepest implications of the critique of judgment. Okay, so we're back for like the grand finale of our deep dive into Kant's critique of judgment.
Yeah.
You know, we've scaled some pretty impressive philosophical peaks from beauty to the sublime. We even grappled with purpose in nature.
Right?
And now we're about to like reach the summit, where we explore the implications of all of this for understanding ourselves and the world.
Yeah.
All right. One of the most like intriguing threads I'm seeing in all these sources is this idea of a supersensible realm, something that lies beyond like our direct experience.
This is where Kant's philosophy takes us beyond what we can see and touch. He suggests that our experiences of beauty, the sublime, and even morality hint at something deeper, a connection to something that goes beyond the physical world.
Okay, now I definitely need you to like hold my hand here.
Yeah.
We're talking about a realm beyond our senses, something we can't see, hear, touch, taste, or smell. How do we even begin to understand that?
It's definitely mind-bending. And Kant is careful to say that we can't have direct knowledge of this realm through our usual ways of thinking. We can't prove it scientifically or define it.
So if we can't perceive it or define it, how do we even know it's there? What clues does Kant give us?
He says we get glimpses of it through specific kinds of experiences. Like when we're deeply moved by beauty, we're not just reacting to the object's physical properties, we're sensing a kind of harmony, a purposiveness that points to something more.
So it's like beauty is a signpost pointing towards something beyond itself.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And the same goes for the sublime. When we're confronted by the vastness of the universe or the power of nature, we're pushed to our limits.
Yeah.
We're forced to acknowledge something greater than ourselves.
I'm starting to see how this connects to what we were talking about earlier with the sublime and morality. It's like those experiences awaken a part of us that isn't just concerned with our own survival.
Exactly. And Kant thinks this connection to the supersensible is like essential to our moral nature. He argues that without it, morality would be impossible.
Because without that connection, we'd just be driven by our instincts and desires, right? Just trying to maximize pleasure and avoid pain.
Yeah, our actions would be totally selfish. But Kant thinks we're capable of more than that. We can reason, make moral judgments, recognize universal principles.
And he's saying this capacity is rooted in our connection to this supersensible realm.
That's the core of his argument. Yeah. We wouldn't be able to act morally if we weren't somehow connected to something beyond the physical.
Okay, so let me see if I've got this straight. Kant is saying that our capacity to appreciate beauty, our awe in the face of the sublime, even our ability to reason morally, all point towards something deeper, a realm beyond what we can directly experience.
Exactly. And while we can't, define this realm with certainty, Kant believes it's fundamental to who we are, both as individuals and as moral beings.
Wow, this is seriously mind-blowing. And I love that it leaves us with more questions than answers.
Yeah.
Which I think is a perfect place to wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah.
We've journeyed through the complex landscape of Kant's critique of judgment, unpacking his ideas about beauty, the sublime, and even venturing into the realm of the supersensible.
Yeah. It's been an adventure.
And as we leave you to ponder all of this, we want to leave you with one final thought-provoking question. Kant suggests that judging beauty connects us to something beyond the purely sensible world. What do you think this supersensible realm might be? And how is it relevant to your own experiences of beauty and meaning in life? Keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deeper.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this philosophical journey. Catch you next time on The Deep Dive.